Hi guys, this is Streamler Carl. So in today's video, I'm going to give you my review to episode 1 of season 1 of American Love Story, JFK and CBK, or better known as Caroline Bessette Kennedy. So guys, this limited and short series is very personal to me because it's basically U.S. history. But to be more specific, it's about one of my closest personal friends, and I know that U.S. history figures are not my family or my friends, but I consider all the people that I've studied in U.S. history as my friends, and this includes the Kennedy family. But to be more specific, this series talks about the heir apparent, the Prince of Camelot, John JFK Jr. and his wife CBK Caroline Bessette Kennedy. So, as we all know how their love story tragically ended. This series explores that, but also before the tragedy that took JFK John away from us. And why we are so entranced and so connected still to his, obviously we're connected to his family because we as Americans loved his mom and dad, meaning John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy. And it also, this series talks about the mystique in a way, in a non-physical character way. But the mystique of the Kennedy family is still here. We still feel it. When we hear anyone with the name Kennedy, we stand up. We stand up. We go, wow. Our minds directly point to Camelot and its descendants after JFK and before JFK. So here we go. Episode 1 of season 1 of American Love Story, JFK Jr. and CBK, Caroline Kennedy. So in this first episode, basically, we start off on the day that Caroline and her sister Lauren and of course John would tragically die. July 16th, 1999. As we all know, or to some of you that might not know, on that day, 27 years ago, this year, the three of them took a private small plane flown flown and owned by John himself, with Caroline her little and her sister Lauren to Martha's Vineyard because they were going to a wedding to John John's cousin's wedding, cousin Worry's wedding, but they never made it. To this day, we still there have been many speculations, but the common sense theory, or the common sense close of this case, was that John lost his aerial awareness, and he since he lost his aerial awareness, he lost his place where he was at, and he tragically died from there. All three of them. But in the first 10 minutes we're in July 16th, 1999. Then we go back a little bit. Then we go back 7 years before that day. Now guys, before I actually begin, I'm not gonna use pictures from the show itself. I'm gonna use real life pictures of JFK Jr. and Caroline. So I'm not gonna use pictures from the show. I'd rather use real pictures of John himself and Caroline. So here we go. 7 years before, we know us, basically all of New York City knows, and basically all of the nation is still enamored with John at age 30. Of course, we first see him like he has been in the public eye all of his life. He was the first. He was the second. He was the third. The fourth or fifth, fifth child to live in the White House since former President Grover Cleveland's daughters. And of course, his older sister Caroline lived in the White House too. So, but the press in 1961, when he was born, took pictures of little John. And of course, the many times that we see him after his birth, or by pictures, or by JFK Oval Office recordings. But the second time that we actually see him in person on TV is when gives a salute to his father's casket after being assassinated in on in November 1963. But going back to seven years before, 1999, July 16th, 1999. Ever since then, all of New York, all of New York, and all of us across the nation we had been enamored with with John John. And yes, we we wanted we wanted we wanted him to follow to follow in his father's footsteps. But as you can imagine, living up to your family's name, you're Kennedy. You are you are royalty. You're American royalty. You're part of Camelot, of the American Camelot. And yes, you have political political legacy to follow, but John didn't want to exactly follow into the politic realm. He wanted to do something else. And that was basically become a lawyer. He failed. He had to take the bar test. Basically, the bar is the test that makes you into an official lawyer. 6 times. He had to take it six times to pass the bar. As you can imagine, the press were hounding him, were basically calling him the prince unlawyered. And yes, he had the moniker of the sexiest man alive, of People magazine. Yes, but again, he was hounded by the press. And again, like I said, a Kennedy is not supposed to fail a test or any kind of social thing, or academically speaking, 5 times to do something. And to top it all off, his intern lawyer boss, because John took an internship to be a district attorney assistant, but his boss, meaning the district attorney, said, if you fail the bar for a third time, which would end up to be 6, I will have no other choice but to can you or fire you. So yes, John had the pressure of living to our expectations, meaning the nation's, and his family's expectation, and he had the pressure of becoming his own dude, and not to be suffocated by his father, by his dad's shadow. So, as you can imagine, living up to your 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 family's golden code of gold per se, was hard for John. Now, this wasn't only the the issue. Besides living up to his dad's shadow, he had to contend with basically he had to contend with his mother's pickiness, meaning Jackie's pickiness of his romantic relationships. And he also had to live under the cloud of steel protection that Jackie put on him because guys, Jackie Kennedy lost her husband. Before losing her husband, her brother-in-law, meaning JFK's older brother, Joseph Patrick Kennedy Jr., had died in World War II. Then she loses. Then after that, and again, JPK dies before Jackie comes into the picture, but still. Then Kathleen Kennedy, meaning Kick, JFK's sister, died in a plane crash. As well, but not in World War II. As she was flying to see her secret boyfriend. She and her boyfriend, her secret boyfriend, were flying to meet with the Kennedy clan, but their plane crashed, and Kick was lost. So she had lost her husband. Then 4 years later, Jackie loses her other brother-in-law, Bobby, by an assassin's bullet, just like she lost her husband. So she decided to obviously remarry and to basically get away from the aura of being a Kennedy. Because even though the Kennedys had a good name, they had a dark death aura around them. So she married Aristotle Onassis, a Greek businessman, rich businessman, but she became, from that point on, she became Jacqueline Jackie Aristotle Ona, Onassis Kennedy. So she still kept the name, but going back to the episode, that's why she kept a protective cloud cover of steel around her children, because she had seen what what the world had done to that part of her family, meaning the Kennedy family. And she basically and Naomi Watts plays Jackie Kennedy to a perfect T, and we get to see the contentious and argumentative battle between John and his mother. But in this episode, after getting into a fight over John's relation choices of relationships with with girls, uh, Jackie and her son, meaning John, get into a heated argument, and like I said, after cooling off, John said, I'm sorry, mom, for speaking to you that way." And then Jackie says in this episode, John, I know that you are 30 years old, but I just don't want to lose you, and I don't want you to lose yourself because of the heaviness of the heaviness of your name, of your last name. So that's why Jackie protected her two children, but mostly focusing in this series John. Now, let's go to the other side of this relationship. Caroline. Now, guys, Caroline Bassett Kennedy worked her worked her face off at Calvin Klein. Yes. That Calvin Klein. that Calvin Klein from Back to the Future. The brand. The most famous brand, one of the most famous brands in fashion. But Caroline, just like JFK, just like John, had to work herself up the ladder to move up or to upgrade her status at a Calvin Klein. Although the only thing that Caroline didn't have to worry about is her name. She didn't have the name Kennedy attached to her. But she still had to work hard to get up to the house of Calvin Klein. And she did that. In this first episode, we see the struggle that she has to go through, because her supervisor her supervisor is basically a pain in the neck, and her boss invites her and invites her to this fancy gala that is is both about fashion and about mingling with famous people. And this is where we get to see, this is where John and Caroline first meet. Now, like any first meeting, it's a typical classic meeting. But as soon as John lays his eyes on Caroline, on Caroline, he's completely entranced. But Caroline, not so much. Caroline, not so much. She's entranced, but not that super entranced. And of course, John is like, my name is, and then Caroline says, I know who you are. I know your family name. And John throws a shot, shoots his shot, and says, I'll give you my number. I'll give you my number. I'll give you my number. And then Caroline says, like any girl should act, says, I don't know you. I just know your name. Your last name is at the very top of at the very top of politics and society. And of course, that's how they left it. That's how they left it. But John did not give up. But I'm getting to that. I'm gonna get to that here in a little bit. Besides working at a Calvin Klein, and I did not know this until this series. And yes, guys, I love history. I'm a history buff, but it's nice. But it's nice for me to learn new stuff about the people that I studied a long time, that I have studied all my high school career. But besides working at a fancy fashion design name like Calvin Klein, Caroline was also a party animal. And before she connected with John, like we know that she did, she had a off again and on again inspiring model boyfriend named Michael. But I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. The day after the first encounter face to face, John goes to Calvin Klein and asks for Caroline. Caroline personally, and of course everyone in the Calvin Klein offices are just like drooling in shock, both drooling in shock, like, wow, we can't believe it, that JFK Jr. is here, and he's in our offices. Both drooling in shock and just like with hearts in their eyes, and he asks the receptionist for Caroline personally. And then when John then when John sees surprises Caroline, we see Caroline is basically smoking, and John catches her smoking, and to get into the door with Caroline again, and he has the perfect excuse. He needs a suit, and he wants Caroline to personally help measure him for the suit. Eventually, John says, let me take you out to dinner. Let me take you out to dinner. Not on a date, but out to dinner as acquaintances, as brand new acquaintances. But in typical Kennedy fashion, well, not typical Kennedy fashion, but in typical Kennedy in typical Kennedy fashion, he's late to his date with his brand new acquaintance. And this date is at an Indian restaurant. So after waiting for about 20 minutes for John, Caroline is like, I'm done. He stood me up. And then, as Caroline is stepping out of the restaurant, John is like bicycling towards her and saying, Caroline, please stop, don't go. Sorry that I'm late. I know that you don't wanna. I know that you want to hit me with a steel chair right now, if you could, and you would have every right to do that. but at least let me buy you dinner. And they basically have a nice big exploratory dinner of the cuisine of this restaurant, of this Indian restaurant. And they start talking. And this is something that I know, that after leaving the White House, and in his college, and after college years, John took a backpacking adventure to India, because that was one of his mother's favorite places to visit. And after talking for a long while, Caroline and JFK walks with Caroline to her apartment / penthouse or apartment, and they end up kissing. Not like a boyfriend and girlfriend kissing, but in a romantic tension way, in a romantic energy way. And the day after, or the morning after Caroline walked into her office, and everyone wants to know, how was your date with JFK? And she tells a few of her closest friends at Calvin Klein. But then she would get the shock of her life when she reads the newspaper that John had gone back together with his ex Cali, meaning California, girlfriend. And that's how this wonderful first episode of an American love story, JFK and CBK Caroline Bassett Kennedy's story ends. So with that being said, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to tap that like button, and if you want to keep yourself up to date to my videos, don't doubt and tap that notification bell. And if you want to expand your time here on my channel, don't doubt and subscribe. So until we JFK again, bye.